This is Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. An informal chats with top business moguls as they share their stories of failure and success in a fun and relaxed way. Get entertained, educated, and unlock the secrets to success.
Welcome to Business Decoded with Ronnie Spellman. We have a wonderful guest on the program with us today, Kevin Richardson. Kevin, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Kevin is joining us all the way from California. Kevin, you have an amazing career. I've read through your bio, and it's longer than mine. I think mine is overly long, but yours is just astounding. And I tell my daughter that one day when she reaches my age, she will have a long bio as well. When you've lived long enough and you have experiences, there's so much to talk about. But you're in the film industry. Uniquely enough, you're not only in the film industry, but you're also in the video game industry. Tell us about what you've done.
Well, I started off in high school sharpening pencils for Sesame Street and Electric Company and animated interstitials. And so I got a chance to hear creative people argue and great things.
So in high school, you worked behind the scenes at Sesame Street?
On their animated interstitials, like you can turn, I don't know, like what something with a silent E, any number of Saxon words, 3-letter words, you can put an E at the end and turn them into another word.
Cool.
And thanks to my teacher in high school. So sometimes, the story there is it takes often we need a guardian angel to push us.
And that is true. I definitely want you to come back to that topic. Where did you attend high school?
Tamalpais High School in Mill Valley, California.
Okay. So it sounds like your school has some connections within the industry. Because getting on Sesame Street, I presume, is really challenging, regardless of what level or what production they have.
Well, I mean, Mill Valley, believe it or not, this little hamlet town in Marin County, California, had 2 animation studios on a little street called Miller Avenue. One was called Mill Valley Animation. The other one was called Cordy Films. And John Cordy was subcontracted to do these little 10-second pieces of animation, animating letters and numbers for Sesame Street and also for the Electric Company. So it was just a coincidence, And don't forget, Lucasfilms was,
right.
It was in San Rafael, and Industrial Light and Magic, and so on and so forth. So it was a very interesting time to be in Northern California.
And that's pretty amazing. Most people think of Southern California and Hollywood when it comes to productions and studios, but you were able to gain your access in Northern California.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, were you a theater kid in high school?
No, I was terrified of theater. In fact, it's taken me a long time to even, sit in front of a camera like this or in front of an audience and chat openly about my career and things.
Now, how did you get started then in Sesame Street out of high school, particularly with not having an interest in theater?
Well, I got involved in it during high school as an internship,
right.
And I wanted to be an animator, so that was my goal. And so the CalArts recruiter came to our school. My art animation teacher in high school said, "You got to meet this guy." I got recruited to CalArts, and I was in a class with a lot of people who went on to do many, many great things. And from there, I worked on a Disney feature film called The Brave Little Toaster, the first one. Then I came back to Marin to work at Industrial Light and Magic, which is Lucasfilms, on Willow and Return of the Jedi and Who Framed Roger Rabbit in the effects department.
Okay.
And
now,
and then from there, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, with Roger Rabbit at that time, that was an incredible marvel from a technology standpoint. People today might not recognize it, but yet, if you don't mind telling our audience about Roger Rabbit and the impact that it had on the film industry, having both animation and live actors in that program, it was a really big deal.
Well, I can tell this story from many different points of view. One is having cleaned up wires off Bob Hoskins so he can fall down the elevator shafts and stuff like that. That's one telling of the story. Another telling of the story is, which has to do with my career, is I wanted to get into pitching films and producing films. So I pitched a film at Disney only a couple of years later based on James Thurber's story, The Breaking Up the Wood Chips, where one of the live action characters turns into Donald. Is that right? Yeah, Donald Duck. I met with the Disney executives. I pitched my film, and they said, "We're never doing another film like Roger Rabbit." And the reason is, I think it was so complicated.
Yeah.
Getting all the rights to all those characters,
Right.
and probably divvying up the proceeds, or the so-called net revenue at the end. They probably said, we just can't get in a quagmire like that again. So those two different tellings of it. One was having a lot of fun, and one was thinking, oh, this was a brilliant film. I wonder if Hollywood wants more of that.
Right.
The answer was absolutely not. Kind of like one thing you'll hear in Hollywood is like, no dog pictures.
Right. That is funny.
No dog movies.
So part of our purpose on Business Decoded, and we've had so much interaction and success at bringing people with amazing talent on the program. I enjoy speaking with people with your background in the film industry, because it's, for so many people, they go to the movies. I saw some really great movies. The summer movies in 2025 is absolutely spectacular. I saw Karate Kid not long ago, and Superman is out in 2025, and I think John Wick series has another major movie, Ballerina, that is coming out. I think it seems like an incredible summer, but people don't recognize what it takes to get in, and they don't understand how big of a business it is, how many people are required in the production, both on set and off set and post and pre-production. So it's really neat to speak with someone like you who gets the industry. But at 18, that was your start. And what happened next?
Well, I was actually 16. I went to college at 17. Yeah. So I was deer in the headlights and drinking from a fire hydrant. So, but what's next? We talked about Disney. I went to Lucasfilms, and then I went to Taiwan because still there was a thing called Saturday morning TV, which doesn't really exist anymore. And a lot of the productions, which were coming from Hanna-Barbera and other companies, for example, Nelvana in Canada, were being outsourced. The animation was being outsourced to a company called Cuckoo's Nest or Wang Films or Wong Films in Taipei, Taiwan. And so I was sent over there as what's called a layout supervisor, where it's sort of it's the next step before things get animated. So it's sort of, there's a script.
Now, this is after you finish college, though, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
So where'd you go to college then? And did you study movie production in college?
I was in the motion picture school at California Institute of the Arts in Valencia, California. I was in there. They had two programs. The character animation program was one, and then they had one called experimental animation, and then they had the live action school.
And that's down in LA, just north of LA then, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So you finished up, and then you had your series of activities at the big studios.
Well, I went to college for 2 years. Back then, you were considered, I mean, I hate to say it, there was a lot of pressure to get out after 2 years.
Right.
They said, if you have, in that school, in that environment at that time, if you don't get recruited after 2 years, maybe something's wrong with you. And so we were all biting our fingernails and thinking, we have to get out of here. And we did. But I'm sorry, what was your question again?
Yeah, no, so you finished at Valencia and then went directly into the business at that point.
Correct. That's correct, yeah.
Now, did you start out in LA after you finished at Valencia?
I stayed in LA for a little while. I worked at Duck Soup Productions. I did for TV commercials. I worked at a special effects studio. You would go wherever the work was. And the big feature film company back then really was just Disney. There were others, of course, but like Don Bluth, but Disney was the biggest thing in town. And so, not like today where it's everywhere,
Everyone has some everywhere. So I want you to definitely get back to your story. One of the items that I didn't recognize until recently, that Desilu Productions, they produced a lot of TV shows and I think quite a few movies. That's Lucille Ball's company. Yep. And it's amazing to see them now on so many credits for programs that I didn't realize they had a hand in. They were, for example. Right. And that came up the other day when I was speaking to someone. So you had Disney and Desilu and I think some other production companies there.
Yeah. It was a lot. There was a lot of places to go back then for effects work and for animation work. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. So if you were speaking with someone that is finishing up in a film program now and looking to get into the industry, what advice would you give them? How do you get into the industry and build a successful career like yours? And we'll get back to what else you've done, but but how would someone coming out of college get into the business?
Well, they're coming out of college right now. I think I was just at my daughter's high school graduation last night. And so there's kids going to USC, Cal Arts, UCLA, and they're all concerned about the same thing, which is AI, right?
Yeah.
And if you saw the news 2 days ago, the one of the chief officers at Lionsgate Pictures is going over to Disney. Why is he going over to Disney? Because he can drop any one of their movies, live action films, into their AI, and 3 hours later bake it out as a Pixar looking movie or a Miyazaki looking, like a Studio Ghibli looking movie, or something that's, the prompt could be look like a Pixar movie, but no copyright infringement, change this and this and this, so the look and feel doesn't confuse people. Because then when you get in that gray area of the law, you're asking for lawsuits. So this mom came to me last night and said, our daughter's going to USC. And by the way, she's a former important Google executive and engineer. Okay. And she said, what do you think? And I said, well, I'm going to send you some articles, because, I'm not hardly an expert, but I can just tell you, I read the newspaper. I told her the same story about Lionsgate,
right?
And I just sent her an article that's a research report, white paper from MIT about the whole AI industry. And so, what would I tell students? I would say they're coming after your imagination,
okay,
but don't let them come after your curiosity, and use your own imagination, because AI is coming for your imagination, right? And they're coming for your job. It's coming for your job.
That is really fascinating. So I was hoping to speak AI at the end of the show, because I want to get back to what you've done career-wise and business-wise, but let's talk AI. That's really, really fascinating. So they're coming for their imagination and their jobs. What does that look like? Like, which jobs do you think will be displaced or most impacted? How is AI? It's amazing when I look at AI across multiple different industries, and how easy it is for people to produce content, whether it's marketing material, flyers, even digital and film level quality. But what you just described, and dropping some information into the AI platform and it truly producing a movie. Can you give us more on the information that you said you sent to your friend about AI and its impact? I find that absolutely fascinating. You're right. A lot of people are worried about it.
Podcasts are so popular, even monkeys are doing it.
75% of Americans listen to podcasts monthly. That's 210 million people in the United States alone. And yes, podcasts are profitable. Joe Rogan is making $30 million per year. Your content, your knowledge is worth sharing. Don't just dream it, do it. Visit AndyCostaFilms.com /podcast and turn your content into leads.
So if you go to https :/archive.is/H number 8 lowercase blv,
right?
You'll read a whole analysis from MIT about what AI is coming for, and particularly about energy use, because I can't say their name, but I have coffee with one of the guys who works alongside one of the main AI think tanks.
Okay.
He's in one of the think tanks. And I said to him, look, if they're building one data center now, like AI's in the area of like fax machine currently. And we know how much water and energy it uses now. And if you read that MIT report, you will start scratching your head. And I said, well, aren't we kind of like, isn't this sort of the end of civilization now? Not because of what AI can come and steal your job, but how much water and energy it's going to use. And he said, well, we're not really allowed to talk about that at the job. 2 days later, he sent me that MIT article.
Okay.
It's not a pretty picture, because there is not that much water or energy on the planet, even if we covered the entire planet with solar panels. I mean, maybe that's probably an exaggeration,
right.
but I think there's enough to be concerned. I think that the future of filmmaking for people who want to stay in it is that you need to learn to do what AI does better, and that would be to tell real good human stories that are technically well done and emotionally well done, but for reasonable budgets, because that's what AI is coming after.
Right.
The reason the executives at Disney and Netflix and all of them are frothing at the mouth is we can turn out something that looks really slick, very cheap.
Right.
But will people watch it? We're going to find out very soon.
That's still being known.
But it's coming like next year.
Right.
So.
Wow. It's coming quick.
Yeah.
And so, the beauty of the film industry is just that imagination piece, it piquing people's imagination and curiosity. And I love the storytelling that happens in filmmaking. But let's go back to your career, your business career. So you're out of college, you're now traveling internationally. You mentioned working with a firm to help with the filmmaking process. What was your next step? Take us through the rest of that progression in your career in the business of filmmaking.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was the kid who, it's probably helpful maybe for your audience. I was the kid from high school who said, I'm never going to travel. I'm not interested in travel. I'm staying in California. And then one of my friends said, hey, I've got to go visit. My parents own some laundromats in India, and I've got an extra ticket. My other friend bailed. Will you come with me? And that changed. I mean, I know we've got other stuff to cover here, but that changed my life forever. Sure. And that's why when I learned there was a role in Taiwan, I was, it's like raising my hand, sign me up. And I went there and worked there. So from there it was back to LA, and then to Germany, overseeing one part of an animated production and animated TV commercials. Cinema in Germany, they were way ahead of the game in terms of doing cinema commercials.
Okay.
So there was a lot of mixed media, computer generated and mixed media animated TV commercials combined with live action for different things, everything from tea to sodas to Ferrero chocolates to women's underwear, everything. I mean,
I've never thought of Germany as the place that would have innovations in that segment, which is neat to hear from you. Most people in this country thinks Hollywood is absolutely the leader across the world. I know India has a lot of production now, and so there are a lot of countries that are big in film production. But yeah, I hadn't heard anyone say Germany had some unique innovations back in that period of time.
Well, two thoughts about that is that I mean, I think that so the Indian cinema came out of the old classic American musicals, right?
Right.
I mean, they call them masala films because they're full of music, and there might even be a little bit of martial arts, and there's stories about class warfare and all this kind of stuff. But they follow a like something like maybe your audience members are familiar with, like a Save the Cat 3-act story kind of structure. Whereas the German film puts, a lot of reasons that German films and European films aren't exported is because it's kind of an uncanny valley. People go, you kind of look like us, but this isn't how we tell stories, and this doesn't feel right. And so once in a while a foreign film breaks through, or you see them at art house pictures where there's a different kind of audience who's open to, things besides peanut butter on white bread, right? But it takes that kind of either audience or shift in thinking for, I think, to overcome this an uncanny valley in terms of story sensibility. So
don't lose your place, Kevin, though, because I've been watching a number of different movies, and I'm looking to see where they may have been produced around the world. There are a lot more context, especially with online streaming now. And the movies have become so good, especially when they speak a language other than English. The dubbing is incredible. Back in the old day, you could tell when the mouth didn't match what you were hearing. Today, it's really hard. Like, it is so good that you can't tell that they're not speaking English because of the dubbing on it.
It's almost perfect. And because you can use, they're using software, and they can, even if the actor who dubs the scene, they can say it out of sync, and then the software will actually slide everything around in their performance to match the mouth them out, and they'll pick the right phonemes. So it starts with a good writer who will, because I've been involved in some dubbing. It starts with a good writer who will rewrite the dialogue phonetically for the language, but so it works pretty well. But then then software comes in. So
that's pretty amazing. So again, I hope you hadn't lost sight on where you were in your discussion, but what are some of the biggest projects that you worked on from the film side of your career?
Well, the biggest ones, I mean, on film, not games, right?
Right.
On film. Well, I like to think of the biggest ones I've worked on, actually the ones I've pitched, even though they've never been made. So I picked some big blockbuster type movies that have never been made. So they're very much alive in my head. Right. But in addition to that, I've worked at, as I mentioned, I worked at Industrial Light and Magic, which is part of Lucasfilms. It was fun to be on Willow and on one of the Star Wars movies and on Roger Rabbit and Brave Little Toaster. Those were more technical roles, so I was more in a sea of 500 people. On the one where I was closer to the core team, pre-production team, was on the Brave Little Toaster. I mean, that's really dating myself, but that was like in my 20s, and and we was part of the core. I think it was like about 10 layout artists where we were creating all the camera shots from the storyboard from Joe Rampt, who was a big player at Pixar afterwards, and right hand to John Lasseter. But anyway, we would work from Joe's storyboards or somebody else's storyboards and turn those into detailed line drawings and character poses and track out and map the whole shot how it was going to work, kind of like blocking it out like you would do in a stage play or a motion picture, right, to make sure everything's blocked out. And then it would go to animation, and so the background drawing would go to the background painters, the poses would go to the animators, and then this all stuff would come together on the camera or digital camera or scanning, and then get colorized and so on and so forth. So it's fun to be part of that core pre-production team, the brains trust or whatever you want to call it of the production.
So I was having this conversation recently with our producer. You mentioned the cameras, and cameras have reduced significantly in size and become very powerful. Do you have a particular brand that you like or a specific camera? And how does that look for you from a business perspective? I interned at Canon, so Canon has been a favorite. I think our producer likes Sony. He says they're much, much better for filming.
Oh, I have no opinion whatsoever. I have no opinion. I mean, it depends. I mean, I've only rented a camera equipment in the last 2 years, maybe once or twice. So so I have no opinion. Yeah.
Okay. So those were some of the big movies. Any unique names, people that you work with? Did you work with Lucas directly on any of the projects, or get a chance to meet him, or any of the other major producers in Hollywood or the movie industry?
We always were rubbing shoulders with George, but I didn't report. I was on more as at those movies, those big movies that we just spoke about. I was more on the technical team, so there were a dozen of me, of guys like me, working on it, cleaning up mats, creating interactive light. This was, Willow had only a few digital shots in it.
Okay.
So if you wanted, if a special effect explosion went on over here and there was light on my face, we were literally baking out every frame of that film onto a big piece of photography paper with pin registration at the bottom, and flipping those photographs, which were frames of the film, with a sheet of paper inside. And with charcoal pencil, well, not charcoal, charcoal's very fugitive, but pencil, animating that light that was going to hit the actor's face. Then they would shoot those black blobs on we would shoot them on high contrast film.
Right.
And then when it would go to the special effects or the matte department or the, I can't remember the name now, but they would burn into the film, light onto those characters from those, marked as those exact frames that we, And so lightning, the cool stuff to do would be lightning or things that resembled like hot solder, kind of hitting the ground and bouncing around and stuff like that,
That is kind of neat. I find it fascinating to watch a movie, and I don't look for this particularly, but when it happens, it stands out, that continuity piece. So if something was in a scene and then it disappears and maybe comes back because they forgot to put it back in the scene. I was once watching and I can't remember the name of the movie. It was a really big movie production. And in the shadow of the car, I could see the production crew reflection. And I thought that is really interesting.
Yeah, no, exactly. That kind of stuff. That kind of stuff happens, and I've seen that happen on. And when I've worked on produced games, I produced a lot of games at Mattel and at Nickelodeon, and at Mattel we were going. So we were still shipping those games in boxes at Mattel, not in Nickelodeon anymore or EA. That was all digital downloads and digital, but I mean the games themselves are digital, of course, but they were still ending up on CD-ROMs, and those user manuals would go through 3 highly trained line editors, and still stuff would slip through. I mean, there's a couple of typos in Harry Potter, for example, one of their first books. You can still find it, I think.
Quite interesting. Now, earlier you mentioned the pitch process. So again, you're executive producer, you're product manager. You've grown so much since the early days, coming right out of college, and the impact on the industry. For a new business person getting into the film industry, what does that pitch process look like? I've served as a judge for pitches on technology products. I've not been on the film side. I can't imagine the scope of what the pitch looks like just from having the screenplay and then selling the story and the idea to a group of maybe investors or other people that might help you launch a movie. But it seems interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, in many ways, it's the same process. So if you're trying to launch a film, let me start that way. If you're trying to launch a film, I mean, you have several choices, right? Like with everything, you can choose to either raise money yourself, and that's the if I make it, they'll come business model, which doesn't always work out for people. And then there's the model where you go to should I stop?
No, you're okay.
Okay. Then there's the model where you will go to Netflix. I've pitched at Netflix, at Apple, at Amazon, at Sony, I've pitched at Paramount, and I've pitched at Warner Brothers. Okay. And so let's just, I'm not going to say which studio because I think it'd be better if I don't, but let's say I go to a certain studio, I pitch something, and and what would start with is they really want to hear they want to hear the story beats, and you maybe have 15 minutes, to tell them the whole story. Maybe not even that, because at some point you either hook them, kind of like if you were doing online doing stand-up comedy, you either hook them and the audience is laughing, or you've lost them, right? So in any case, you're going to bring maybe art elements to it. You have hopefully have a screenplay. You might have a story treatment. You need a story treatment, which there's like, let's just say it's a 3-act story, and there's 15 so-called story beats typically for that story. And you're going to pitch that story with pictures or without pictures.
Right.
And at the end there, you're going to say, well, we liked everything except, the all is lost moment, a deep number, whatever it is, needs to be higher. I mean, the audience has to be sitting on the edge of their seat, like, what the hell are they going to get there? They may ask who you're bringing, what studio is going to produce this. For example, if you go to some of the studios have animation capabilities or are very strong at outsourcing. Some aren't. So you have to consider, if I'm going into a studio that has no animation ability, what studio do I have behind me that's going to produce this? So you're going to be making business connections before you go and do that pitch. And you say, and Studio X, and here's their reel. Look how capable they are, and this is how cool this movie will look. And it also helps to have either an animatic.
Okay.
An animatic, which is essentially a rough facsimile of the film that you can project or watch on a TV, right, with a rough soundtrack and with cuts and things timed, or even a test from that studio, that imaginary studio I just mentioned, that has capable of executing your film. So So they look for that. I mean,
That's
that kind of stuff.
So going into that meeting, then if you have the sample of the work that you just described, how much of a cost is that for you to build out to get something that's ready for them to review? Like if you're having some of the rough cuts and as you mentioned, I'm not sure what that process, I don't know how much of a display you have going in to showcase what the idea looks like. You know, I know some places you have a whole storyboard with either cutoffs or samples of scenes or the like. It's intriguing how much. So if someone is looking to invest in, if other than having words on a paper from a screen set perspective, if you're having something to take in there with you, what does that look like? Is there a major cost component?
I think it depends on the project. If you call up and ask the studio and say, I'd like to pitch some film, and you ask, what should I bring? They'll tell you, whatever you think will sell this.
Right, exactly.
And so the cost, I've seen some of the pitches that were pitched at this, like I was invited into sort of the war room at one of the studios, said, I won't say the studio, but they said, this is the type of movie we're looking for. Here, I want you to see everything that's been pitched so far related to this. You're going to be the last pitch. And it was really extraordinary to see what all the top development studios in LA were pitching. And, you know, you got a sense what I mean, I was both. Yeah, I don't know how to characterize that situation, but in any case, the studios. So what did that story just tell you? Is it tells you that a couple of things. One is that most studios, for right or for wrong, are looking to fill a hole in their library.
Right.
Whether that's the hole they need to fill, they don't really know for sure, right? Because by the time they put the thing in production, maybe it's 2 years out or whatever, that there may be no need for that film that they just put in production, right? Or the way it was executed wasn't right.
Right.
All kinds of stuff can go wrong. So you've got a lot of people, you're going to be encountering a lot of people making sometimes educated guesses, sometimes just seat of the pants feelings, all kinds of stuff. It could be potentially crazy making. But back to your question, how much should it cost? If you're James Cameron and can storyboard the whole thing yourself, and you walk in with your pitch book,
right,
and you've storyboarded all yourself, you didn't have to hire a story artist, you didn't have to hire a script writer, you didn't have to, then it costs you your time.
Okay.
I've spent in the neighborhood of the most for an individual project where I've gotten involved would be like probably under $100K. So
oh wow.
But you've got everybody though. But I've raised money for that.
Sure.
And sometimes it's involved licenses like famous characters. So I might go out and license. I was also involved in licensing it when I was at part of the learning company in Mattel. So I might go on and license. I said, these characters still are very popular.
Right.
Well, how about what if I were to do a project based on these characters?
Gotcha.
But that's a challenge. Has its own challenges all by itself. And we're happy to peel that back to it.
So the process isn't going to look like an episode of Shark Tank, where
Kevin O'Leary. Yeah, I worked for Kevin O'Leary for a while. Yeah.
Did you? Oh, yeah. Well, we'll have to say that for the next show. But no, it's interesting when I talk to young business people, even not even young by age, but just maybe new to the entrepreneurial side. Shark Tank, I think, gives people a lot of lessons on what a pitch process might look like. They shorten that into just a few minutes on the program, even though that discussion may have taken 30 minutes, an hour plus, and then they shorten it for television. But on the pitch side that I've been as a judge, you're right, it's usually about 15 minutes, and that is it.
Yep.
So you've got in and out, and you have to have a very tight presentation, meaning that it has to be short and concise, and you have to get as much information out as you can and make it understandable. So I can't imagine telling a whole movie in a matter of minutes like that. It's just complicated, it seems.
Well, mostly in Hollywood, they're looking for the ironic logline. So you usually are leading with the ironic logline. So it's usually 2 sentences long, and it has to have irony in it. And if they go like, yeah, I want to hear more, then you would go into the bigger pitch. It could be dead after that ironic logline. So if you ever read the book Save the Cat, which I think is an excellent place to start for people who want to get into that business, is you should start with a log line, because all your decisions will be informed. All your creative decisions, all your character decisions, all your dialogue decisions, all your music decisions, everything will be informed by that 2-sentence log line. Kind of like when you walk into a company, like, Google, it's I forget what their thing is, but it's something and do no evil, right? And that's there. So you need that. If you don't have that, I think it's like you're jumping on an airplane and we're flying somewhere. Where are we flying? I don't know. We'll know when we get there. I mean, so the log line keeps you going. We're going to LA. This movie is going to Los Angeles. And, because then it becomes Snakes on a Plane, or becomes, then it becomes Airplane. Snakes on a Plane becomes, the plane gets hijacked. Now we can talk because we know what this movie's about, right?
Well, Kevin, I know we're out of time on this program. I want you back on our program. I'd love to start with the ironic log line. That the terminology is new to me. I'm not in the film industry, but I'd love to start there just to help people understand what that looks like. We talk a lot about an elevator pitch as businesses look to promote their product or service. But I'd love to start there. But I appreciate you coming on the program. This is really neat to talk to someone with your level of experience. And then when we come back, I want to explore more about the rest of your career and what you've done, maybe some of your favorite programs. It looks like you worked on titles like Family Feud and Trivia Pursuit and some others. So I'd love to start in
games.
Yeah, those games. So I'd love to start there and explore more. I think this is insightful for people wanting to get into filmmaking or the video game industry.
Absolutely. Yeah. Happy to chat with you anytime.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you for joining us on the Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman.
Thank you for listening to Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. Please be sure to subscribe and share, and stay tuned for more incredible Business Decoded episodes.